Prospect House Media.
And now, prepare yourself for the only weekly podcast you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show with Troy Edgar, live from our studios in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Hey everybody, I am Troy Edgar and welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. Thank you for tuning in and checking it out. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast examines the conditions for personal and economic growth and opportunity across America. This week, I met with Yorba Linda Water District President Brett Barbre at my LA studio in Southern California. It was great to be back home and connect with Brett and talk about his career, water policy, and the state of the California water infrastructure. California has the fourth largest economy in the world, ranked behind the US, China, and Japan. The state economy relies heavily on water for various industries, including agriculture, manufacturing, energy, and tourism. Brett has over 30 years of experience and has served as the director on the boards of the Municipal Water District of Orange County and the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. He is a recognized expert on the issues related to the importation of water from Northern California via the State Water Project and from the Colorado River via the Colorado River Aqueduct. This is a system that delivers water to approximately 20 million residents and serves the largest population of any water district worldwide. In this episode, Brett and I also talk about working together since 2006 when he ran my first city council race. I asked him what he looks for in a new candidate running for public office. He says I focus on three things: fire in the belly, key endorsements, and to determine if the candidate really wants to be someone or actually do something. I hope you enjoy. Good evening, Brett. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Troy?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for coming over and doing this.
That's an honor to be invited.
Yeah. Brett, you and I have known each other since 2006, and we've had a lot of great experiences together. From the listener's perspective, other than, the fact that you're the president of Water District and very involved in the water industry, you and I have a lot of history together in politics, and a lot of the things that we do and the activities that we talk about on the show is a lot of people want to figure out how to get involved in different levels of policy and how important it is. And I thought this discussion would be very interesting to kind of give people a perspective of, one, how does somebody that is in the policy industry like yourself take a look at the lay of the land and understand taking very complex things and making them simple. And then, looking at, hey, we are in California this week. And so looking at infrastructure, water, I think that maybe using your experience, maybe we'll use that as kind of a conduit to kind of explain a little bit of a policy. And we'll slip into a little bit of the careers in policy and the elected side of that. One other kind of part that I thought that was very helpful for me, and I think the listeners will find helpful, is that, when people that aren't in politics and they want to make a difference in their community and they want to really try to do something, whether it's at the local level, on a council, a school board, state assemblies, senates, et cetera, all the way up to Congress and above, what I'm hoping to be able to do with the podcast is to help people kind of get involved in their community, really be able to do both things. One, be successful in whatever field that they're pursuing, to pursue their American dream, whatever it is. And if it's politics or something like that, or policy, this episode would be a good one for them to listen to. So again, thank you for coming in and being on the show. And that's some of the stuff that I was hoping that we would be able to kind of cover off. What I thought would be interesting to kick it off is to introduce you a little bit to the listeners, to get an idea of your background, where you started, just to kind of set that up. So if you wouldn't mind, Brett, if you could just kind of give the listeners your backstory.
Sure. I grew up in Orange County, California. Was born in Fullerton, moved to Yorba Linda when I was 6. Many people know Yorba Linda as the home of the Richard Nixon Library and birthplace. President Nixon was born there. And I lived in that community before he got elected president, when he was president, and after he was president, and saw the transition from a little elementary school and the house in which he was born, how that was transformed into the Richard Nixon Library and birthplace today. It's the most unique one in the nation. And you know, I have all my bucket lists, and one of my bucket lists is going to all the different presidential museums, and not just because it's my hometown, but it is one of the more unique ones because it has that birthplace where he was actually born. His father built the house, and both he and his wife were buried there. And that in and of itself is a fascinating story. We can come back and chat about that sometime.
Sure.
But I grew up in Orange County, played sports. Went to college in Oregon, went to George Fox College in Newberg, Oregon. It's a Quaker college. Now it's a big-time university, but when I was there, it was just a college. And really, my interest in politics started really in my family. My grandparents were involved in politics. My folks were involved in the Young Republicans. In fact, they joke that when they were pregnant with me, my mom was walking for Richard Nixon for governor in '62, and then I was born. And then I helped carry brochures in the baby carriage with me for Barry Goldwater in '64. So I guess you could say it was kind of in my blood. And then obviously the Nixon family connection, my aunt was roommates with Pat Nixon in college, and so I grew up hearing about the Nixons and following that. So, my first trip to Washington, D.C. in 1978 was pretty life-changing. We stayed with my aunt and uncle. They lived in McLean. We'd ride in every day with my Uncle Curtis, and they'd tell us where to go. And I remember walking into the Senate, and I'm just walking in the hallways, and I literally bumped into Ted Kennedy. Senator Kennedy, I bumped into him, and he said, "Excuse me," walked on. Many years later, I got a chance to chat with him because he would go out and, throw the tennis ball for his dog, and it just was a great guy.
Yep.
So,
yeah, when going through that, like the going to Washington, D.C., was that when you were actually in college? Because I know you and I, through a lot of our discussions, I know you started actually in college working for a candidate, even at that early age.
Yeah, in college, that was actually, I was 15 my first time to D.C., so that was a big summer trip, and did Williamsburg and all that, all the historic stuff. And history's always been a passion for me, and so that's always very important. But when I got to college, I had an old family friend that decided to run for office, and so I volunteered to help and started learning about campaigns, learning about voter registration rolls, learning how you put a campaign together. Led 1984 to running a congressional campaign in Portland. Unfortunately, it was the only congressional district that went for Walter Mondale in the state of Oregon, but so be it. But I remember in 1984, a guy named Jeff Taylor, who got me involved in the Reagan campaign, he said, "When you sign up, you will do this the rest of your life." He said, "It's like a disease. It gets in your blood and you'll never get rid of it." And I kind of laughed it off. It's true. It will always, you'll always go back to it. And for me, it's always something you can fall back on. I don't run campaigns professionally anymore. I do them for friends just to help out because I'm more interested in policy development. But when you learn about running campaigns, you meet electeds, you start reading books about politics and history. My grandfather gave me The Conscience of a Conservative by Barry Goldwater. Huge impact on me. American Renaissance by Jack Kemp. Every Reagan Republican, college Republican read that. Witness by Whittaker Chambers about the anti-communist movement. And of course, being a hometown boy, anything by Richard Nixon. I have 3 or 4 copies of most of his books, many of them autographed. So that was a huge impact on me. And it's important to understand what went on in the past because, as you and I have talked about before, it used to be you had to be really wealthy to be involved in politics. And the greatness with America was when they formed the country and formed the government, they didn't want people to do it full time. They wanted the farmer to go part-time, do the legislative business and come back because those individual experiences make a big difference. So I went to work for a member of Congress, really developed my press skills, my writing skills, legislative skills, and you learn this craft. And I decided I really didn't, I went to law school for a year and I really didn't enjoy it. And my boss, who was an attorney, said, well, if you're not going to practice law, don't do it. You know enough for the political realm. Don't waste your time with that, which was really, really good advice. And then from there, I just moved into doing campaigns, helping people, pursuing public policy. And ultimately, in 1998, in my community, there was an opening on a local water board. And I had gone on a water trip maybe 10 years earlier, an inspection trip that you've been on the Colorado River. Yep. And it was fascinating. And I decided I'm going to run because water is a huge issue in California. And so I also figured if I can't get myself elected to a water board, I need to change my profession.
Right.
And I was fortunate. I got elected and then got elected to a county water board. 2 years after that, got appointed to the board of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, which is the nation's largest water district. We provide water to 20 million people in Southern California. And, that's how I got started.
So when you were working your way through policy-wise, I know that you also put together a company that, you did some of that political advisement work that you did. And so your own company. So you kind of looked at kind of both sides of it, not only just, trying to be able to make a difference through policy, but to try to work with people. Back in that time when you actually were doing it possibly for money, it was probably, to go through the process with a candidate to try to size somebody up to say, hey, look, do I want to work? Because, I tell people this in business too, is that, business is sort of like a baseball game. You have wins and losses, and hopefully over your career, you are going to have more wins than you have losses. But like baseball, no one has 1,000 batting average. It's, the low 300s is a good one. And, so you got to kind of take that. What I think is interesting, when you and I did get together, 2006, we were sitting at a restaurant, an outside patio. I remember this to this day. And I'm a business guy wanting to get involved in my community. My community was going, from that perspective, we were going financial hard times. And I figured I had something to offer, but I was a business guy and I had limited amount of time to, I couldn't just do that full time, but I also wanted to make sure I ran it professionally. And, maybe because a lot of people that listen to this that want to get involved with their community, and again, it doesn't matter, this show, we're not political of whether we're Republican or Democrat, but just to, especially at the local level, it's nonpartisan, and people want to get involved. It would be interesting from your perspective how you size up candidates, because I think if you talked a little bit about it, somebody that's ever thinking about getting involved in their community or running for higher office, it would be helpful to hear how you look at people and what strengths you look for so people can reconcile themselves. What would be your perspective?
It's interesting when you're in Washington, D.C., when you're a low-level staffer and you're watching all this go on, or you're working in a presidential campaign, there's a lot of glitz. Everyone sees the glitz, the glamour. They see the fundraisers. They don't see the hard work that goes on. And I kind of developed this rule of thumb. It's a 90-10. 90% of people in politics are there to be somebody. They're not going to put in the time, but they want to find the way up. And, you'll see them at a cocktail party, and they'll be looking past you to see if there's someone more important they can go talk to, or they'll name drop. 10% actually want to get something done. And I'm always more comfortable with those that want to get something done, because it means there's a purpose and there is something that's driving them. One of the examples I use, there was a member of Congress by the name of Bobby Fiedler, and she was from the Valley in LA. And this was in the 70s. Busing was a huge issue in her community. She was just a mom with kids, and she didn't want her kids getting bused to South Central LA. And so she got involved, and she had a mission, and she had a reason to run, and it took her all the way to Congress. And so she was driven by issues. And there are a lot of people, I don't want to name names, but there are a lot of people that grew up with money. They can write a big fat check. They write the big check and they run and they win and they do nothing other than be there and show up. So I've always been more at home with people that want to do something. The thing that always impressed me about you is you were very clear in what you wanted to do, but you were okay getting professional advice to move and to get those things done. I remember the first disagreement we had, you said, oh, I think we can do two-color printing. And I said, no, you're a corporate guy. You have a corporate image. You're a very successful businessman. You don't want to put out cheap crap, just black and white and maybe one color. You want 4 color. And so you said, okay, I'll trust you. And that was the beginning of a great relationship. You also learned the importance of meeting people, and this is something that when you're in the lobbying business or in the campaign business, you may not know everybody, but you know somebody who knows somebody. And if they will vouch for you and you can use that endorsement in your campaign, it's a big plus. And so your first time out, most voters will say, well, I have no idea who this guy is, but I recognize my senator, recognize my supervisor, the county treasurer, and I trust them. So, okay, I'm with this guy. And so it's really kind of fun to put that together. But for me, it's fire in the belly. And you had it. And there are very few candidates that really have that. And in my day, I've won a lot of races, and I've probably forgotten a lot of the races I've won. But there are races when you lose them, they just stick with you and it sticks in your craw, and it's that competitive piece and you hate it. And that goes back to, my sporting days. I hate it. No one likes losing. I'm a diehard Boston Red Sox fan, so I don't like losing. And the last couple of years have been terrible for me. We had some great years, but it's been really tough.
Right. It's interesting, Brett. So when we talk a little bit about, the show Meritocracy, and, one of the purposes for going after this was that, I think people that want to achieve things in their life, they need to put their mind into that mindset, and they need to put together short-term goals and go after, and to use your example of getting endorsements. Endorsements are a form of the meritocracy. It's like I can't just say I'm the greatest person, or I can't just write a check and say I'm the greatest person. My actions have to show that I'm not sure if I'm the greatest, but I am worthy of being considered. And then over time, you build your achievements, and then you go back to those people and say, I've done this. And they're like, absolutely. And I remember you and I, when we ran a race for me for State Assembly 2012, we basically went and had all mayors of Orange County, 32, backing the campaign. And I thought, I was very honored that people would, put their name to it. And we know from history that endorsements don't always win races, obviously. But I just think that in the meritocracy type of, merit, it is a form of currency to be able to kind of do that. And I think where I found you very valuable in that context is you have to start somewhere, and you have to find people that know what person's opinion really matters, and be able to then have an opportunity to have access to meet that person to say, hey, can I talk to you about why I'm doing this? So it's overwhelming at the beginning to try to figure out where to start. And I think you've always been somebody, and I've watched you with a lot of other campaigns, you bring people in and you kind of help get them oriented and be able to go through. I read as you kind of put together, your ability to do campaigns, but you also get involved with your water district work. I wanted to go back to the water just a little bit and maybe use this as a way to kind of a framework of talking about both policy, how you break down things that are kind of complex, and then how do you navigate the career parts and the political parts. And so you said something that was pretty important. You said that you got involved at a local water district. Let's call that retail. You get involved at an Orange County water district like Metropolitan, or the Metropolitan Water District of Orange County. and you're able to then get into a little bit of the distribution of water and then you kind of go up to Metropolitan of Southern California, which is how does water come from the Colorado River or the water project? And can you lay more detail on that, and maybe even just historically, because, how is this industry set up, and why is it so important in California?
Well, I think you really have to look at the history and how we got to where we are today. So most developments throughout history are close to water because you need water to survive, and it needs to be clean, fresh water. If you don't have clean, fresh water, you need to find a way to either drill down and find it or import it. Southern California really became the poster child of taking a desert and turning it into something. And you have to go back and look at the history and what allowed us to do that. I'm not a huge government fan, but the government does do big things very well. And if you look at the history of the Bureau of Reclamation, they were founded to create an abundance of water and power to allow the economies to grow. And so if you look at just California as a whole, the very first project that really helped Southern California was the LA Aqueduct. And it was controversial, and it was a water grab, but it brought water down to Los Angeles, and they brought more than they needed. That's how the valley kind of took off, and a lot of ag, citrus. It was a huge thing. Then you had Hetch Hetchy in San Francisco, which allowed San Francisco to have lots of water and power, an abundant supply of power.
Explain what Hetch Hetchy is.
So Hetch Hetchy, if you've ever seen pictures of Yosemite, there's a twin of Yosemite, which is just north of it. And that was dammed by San Francisco, and they put in the O'Shaughnessy Dam and basically dammed up a Yosemite Valley, and it's got water, and then it just gravity flows to San Francisco, and they have power generators, and it's been a good deal for them. But that was in the teens and 20s. Then Metropolitan was able to build their aqueduct because of the construction of Hoover Dam. Hoover Dam is a miracle. I mean, I love visiting it because it's huge and it generates power. And that dam cost not one damn penny to the taxpayers because they put generators on. They sold those contracts to different entities, different cities, different power companies. And Hoover Dam did not end up costing the taxpayers one red cent. It was all refunded back, and they continue to make money off of it. So that's how they built infrastructure in the past. And I like to say California has a dam water problem. We don't have enough of them because dams will give you a multiplicity of things. Gives you flood control, which is very important. Gives you water storage, gives you power generation, gives you recreation. So it gives you all of those things. So the Colorado River Aqueduct brings water 242 miles from the Colorado River to Riverside, California, and then distributed through Southern California. That allowed Southern California to grow. We never could have put Parker Dam in if Hoover Dam wasn't there, because the Colorado River used to run crazy every 7 years, and you get these big floods. If we have time for a little side story, that always makes me giggle. There's a great book by Michael Hiltzik called Colossus, and it's about the construction of the Hoover Dam. And the Chandler family, which, if you know history of Southern California, the Chandler family owned the LA Times, and they had huge farms in Mexico. And so they were opposed to the construction of the Hoover Dam because every 7 years they got this fresh, red, wonderful silt and soil. It was great for farming and water. And they were opposed to the Hoover Dam going in. Well, halfway through the planning of the Hoover Dam, Mexico seized their property, and they became the biggest proponents for Hoover Dam. It was actually kind of funny. But so that was built. And then the State Water Project was built in the 60s and 70s. Pat Brown was just a great legacy thinker. He brought us the UCs, the Cal States, the junior colleges, which, by the way, was all funded by revenue from what? Offshore oil drilling. So we had all those energies working together. Didn't cost the ratepayers or taxpayers engineers, anything. And the State Water Project to this day still is paid by the water users, not the state doesn't contribute anything to it. So we had this great infrastructure in 1973 for 20 million people. We could move a drop of water from the Oregon-California border to the Mexico-San Diego border. No problem. Today we have 40 million. We didn't do anything. Now, 1973, and this is my funny story, 1973, what was the most efficient way of distributing music? And when I give speeches, I show an 8-track tape. Most people don't know what an 8-track tape is, but the 8-track tape of Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, their best album ever, and 1973's best album of the year. Yep. 9 songs on that. Then I hold up my iPhone. I've got 7,000 songs on my iPhone. Why is it the technology for music storage has increased, yet we're still dealing with the same infrastructure from 73? And that's a big challenge. And there are some, you can get into policy discussions. We don't need to do that. But that's part of it. You have to look at the history to figure out where you are now. So when I ran for office, my first conclusion was we could never build these projects today. We've been trying to fix the Sacramento-San Joaquin Bay Delta for 50 years. We're just now getting another set of environmental documents approved, and it's going to get sued to Kingdom Come. So something has to happen. We just, that creates so much gridlock in this country, whether it's roads, whether it's trains, whether it's movements of goods. So I get frustrated with that. I want people that are going to actually do things, not just show up at events and cut ribbons. No, I want people that are going to work and do things.
Brett, within water districts, obviously there's career people. It's sort of like being in DC, you know, when I was at Homeland Security is, you know, there's political people embedded and that are trying to kind of hyper push policies for 4-year sprints at a time. And then there's career people that are really trying to balance, you know, the best, you know, to keep a continuity of government, to keep the operations moving. And, you know, because they're in there for very long periods of time, their whole career, you know, you could argue that, you know, at some points, sometimes it's hard to overcome the inertia of an organization that, you know, does have professional people that are in there that may feel like they have the knowledge to overcome political people. That I go back to the beginning of this interview when I'm sitting in the parking lot or an outdoor patio with you, and I'm a business guy. You know, fast forward from that discussion 2006 to 2012, I'm the chairman of the Orange County Sanitation District, the largest wastewater sanitation district here on the West Coast, and doing unbelievable things. It's hard to imagine that a person that's a business guy that could first, you got to do a good job for your city. And then you got to be good enough politically to then get appointed to that board. Then you're on a board with 23 other people, including 2 or 3 county supervisors and all mayors of all of Orange County, to then be able to get kind of up and on top to become the chair of that board. So it's quite a journey. Again, back to the meritocracy, you have to earn your credential all the way up there.
Right. But how many of those people, and I know all of them, how many come in for the board meeting, walk over, pick up their notebook, and they open it for the first time? They're there because they want to be somebody. They want to have on their resume, I'm on the sanitation district. I voted for this or I voted against this. I want to go to this conference. I want to show up. You, on the other hand, small handful of folks that actually get into the details and read and use your experience and background to figure out, hey, here's how I can help make this agency better. And I remember talking to some folks from the Inland Empire that said, you were the first chair of the sanitation district that actually fixed some of these long-term problems. And that's who you are. You're a fixer. You get things done. The best piece of advice I ever got in the water world, the first water board I got elected to was Yorba Linda in 1998. And a guy named Art Korn, who had been in the water business for 40 years, knew where every pump and pipe was in the district. He said, before you cast a vote on anything, look at the mission statement. If what you're going to vote on fits in that mission statement, vote for it. If it's not in there, don't vote for it. And, you see this all the time at city councils where, their roads are falling apart, their water systems are dying, but they're voting on the resolution on the latest foreign policy matter. Like, it doesn't make a difference. Keep your focus. And I know in business, if you lose your focus, and in anything, in a campaign, you put together a good plan and you stick to that campaign plan. And if you deviate from it, it's going to create issues. And sometimes you can't control those things. So that's, to me, that's a piece of advice. Take a look at what's going on and how it fits.
Brett, I remember, in those times that I was involved with water, wastewater, it was interesting because, there's a perception in California of sustainability and green and, what's good and bad. And it seems like, there's complete common ground on the issue with water. It seems like it's kind of something that kind of overarches a lot of the help that you had given me, when I was in political office. I'd go back to DC and meet on behalf of either my city or the different boards, especially the water district or the sanitation district, where we're trying to get federal funds to come to Southern California. It was always interesting, the contacts that, although you were here, and I see you here all the time, but when I'd go back there, it was very helpful to have the fact that you had all these relationships and being able to go through. And I was just wondering if you would just talk a little bit about the activity of going back into DC and maintaining the relationships and being able to be effective and kind of helping, political people that are kind of, I'll just say it for myself, was a novice, but we really do, it's a big investment to take off work and go for a 1 to 2 day ledge day on whatever, fill in the blank. It was always good to have people lined up to be able to make sure that you could get the most out of it. And, we both know Ryan Levitt. Ryan was on our show, and, he made a comment, and he's like, with mayors, like helping people, if you just want to meet your congressman, you can do that. You're important enough in a district. The difference, and I think he made that point, and he's another expert. With you too, I feel it was the same way, is that you were able to kind of get us to the right people, and it was more of just not just handshaking, it was actually substance. How did you maintain that relationship over the years, being both here and in DC?
It just takes time. Going back there, I would go back once a month. And it's like in sales, you don't ask for the sale every single time. You want to become a resource for these people. And so when you go back and you talk to a member of Congress, say from Orange County, and there's a big water issue, more than likely everybody on their staff has never lived in Orange County. They're from New York, they're from Minnesota, they've never been out here. And so I saw that as an outstanding opportunity. As a director at Metropolitan, we would have these inspection tours. And it's really important to show these things and show them to our community and show them to our elected officials. So I went to my board and I said, I would like to do tours for legislative staff. And so my board set aside money. And if there was a member staff that wanted to come out and learn about a water project, but they didn't sit on that particular water committee, had no travel funds, we would cover that. And so they would come out and they would go on these water trips. And I really credit, there's a gal, she's now down in San Diego. Her name is Alexandra Barrenter, and she works for the mayor of San Diego, does water policy there. And I took her on a Colorado River trip. She worked for Ken Calvert, who was a member of Congress, did a lot of water stuff. And she said, hey, I'm part of a group and we're negotiating the California water fix. Would you host a trip for all these folks? And I said, absolutely. So she sent me a list. And so we had folks from, Mr. McCarthy's office, Mr. Val, all the people in California that are big players in DC on California water issues. And these folks came out, they saw everything, and they said, it is, and even to this day when I go back, I see them and they say, I never have forgotten that trip because I was negotiating on X issue and I said, I stood there and I saw the Delta Cross Channel and I understand the Delta Cross Channel. That's a very in the weeds thing. But it's important to become a resource.
Yeah.
So I was back there all the time, and I just tried to be a resource for them and help them. I never asked them for support, never asked them for money or anything like that, because I just wanted to be a resource. And that's part of when you get to a certain point in your career, you can start pouring yourself into others and help others that may want to move on. And so now when they want to move and go to another position, they'll call me, hey, do you know anyone around here? Sure. And it's great to help. And I talk about my DC kids all the time. And it's a lot of fun to go back there because I have a philosophy. If you love your job, you never work a day in your life. And so I was able to, because I had a good business, had a good background, had good districts that wanted me back there helping them. I got to spend a lot of time there. So built a lot of relationships, had some, and DC is a big city, but it's a small town. I remember walking down the hallway and there's a gal standing in line to go into a hearing. And she and I had worked together on the Hill 30 years earlier. And so we just kind of chit-chatted and caught up. And, you run into people like that. And it's fun. I'm a big networker, as you know. I like to put people together and spend time with people. And now I have a daughter that lives back there, and her husband and kids are there. So it's an extra incentive to get back and go see them, but go see my friends on the Hill.
Brett, as we kind of get here to the closing, and any item or anything that you would like to leave the listeners with, to kind of think about, whether people that are sitting back, they hear your background of policy, they hear your background of getting involved in politics, a fascinating kind of view of how you size up candidates. So people, if they ever wanted to be sized up, at least they could listen to this and get an idea what people look for. Anything else that you think would be helpful to kind of pass on for consideration for people?
A couple of things. You need thick skin. You'll remember this when you ran. We hired a firm to do a background research on you.
Yeah.
And then we all had to sign a waiver, and then we all met up in Sacramento and we went through everything and we decided what are the worst things that could be said about you. And so we put together that list. Then we said, go sit down with your family, make sure they're comfortable with it. A lot of people, they think they have thick skin, but they're pretty thin-skinned. And if you're thin-skinned, you're not sure about yourself, you're not comfortable in your own skin, don't run, because you won't be a good candidate and you'll be distracted by that. Run for a reason. The perfect sermon has 3 points. And as I always say in a campaign, figure out those 3 reasons why you're running and stick to it, because people can see through someone who is not authentic. I mean, I can tell who is and is not authentic, but do it with a purpose. And public service is great, because you're involved in your community. You're going to meet some of the greatest people. You're going to get to participate in things that most people wouldn't dream of. I mean, I've met people, presidents and senators, I mean, all these different people that I never thought I would dream of meeting. But you get a chance to meet these people and meet fascinating entrepreneurs. But you're doing something good for your community. That's the greatness of this country, where anybody, doesn't matter who your parents are, you can work hard and you can make a difference in your community, whether it's on a city council, on a school board. I mean, look at the revolution we've had across this country, because of COVID and parents seeing what was going on in the schools. You had an uptick in people, I need to get involved in my school district. Mm-hmm. And many times it's very easy to say, everything's fine, but then things aren't. Yeah. So you need to be a change element. So.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Brett, I really appreciate you coming on the show. And because of our extended friendship, I didn't bring up how you invited me to an Angel game to go see the Boston Red Sox, and then made me pay for it. But
well, that's because I have a rule of thumb that as an elected official, I do not accept gifts.
There you go.
And I had received these from somebody who was a lobbyist, and I assumed you had the same policy, which you did. And
I was in an elected office at the point.
You were an elected official, and so just trying to keep you out of trouble.
Yeah. So everybody, if you have a good friend that invites you to stuff, and And it's one thing. It's not, the Angels haven't been like the show pony of Major League Baseball.
They were great seats, by the way, weren't they?
Well, yeah, I'm going to get...
They were 2 rows back.
Yeah, exactly. But there was more Red Sox fans in the stadium than Angel fans. But that's not the point. The point that they were so good that those tickets were $400.
No, they weren't.
So I mean, just the point.
Do I need to pull out the picture of the ticket again? Because we had this discussion one other time, and I sent you, and you said, oh, yeah, it wasn't that much.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly I have to end this podcast. So everybody, thank you so much, Brett. And I
Troy, this was a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, my friend. Thanks again for joining me today on the Ameritocracy Show. Be sure to follow me on social media and our website at troyedgar.com, where you can get more information and sign up for my weekly email. I hope you have a great week.